I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
We're exporting a whole lot of really bad and dangerous rhetoric, bad research, and unfortunately it's being picked up and amplified in other countries.
It's the same battle, Mr. Myers. We've been at it before. They want to addict these kids, this time to an e-cigarette, which has a chemical that's addictive. We know what it leads to. Sadly, it leads to tobacco addiction, disease, and death.
I'm going to get you addicted to nicotine. I have a customer for life. We have hundreds of cases nationwide where people have gotten sick or died using these devices.
Look what they're trying to do. All the delicious flavors of e-cigarettes are poison.
They're not people giving up smoking. They're not people that ever smoked before. Most people that vape never smoked before. Just think if your kid was doing this and winds up with an IQ 10 or 15 points lower than he or she would have had for the rest of her life.
Most people who vape are current or former smokers. For the addicted adult smoker who switches, there's going to likely be a reduction in risk.
There's a tremendous push to bring about prohibition. To actually prohibit vaping. Whereas the evidence strongly suggests that actually, up to now, the most successful way of people stopping smoking cigarettes is vaping.
When vaping increases, smoking decreases.
That's right.
When vaping is restricted, smoking increases.
We're worried that, in fact, a lot of members of the public still think that using an e-cigarette is as harmful as smoking a cigarette. So, I mean, I have said that it would be tragic if smokers didn't quit and carried on smoking because they haven't tried an e-cigarette, because they're worried about the safety of an e-cigarette.
The most disheartening thing is still the anti-choice rhetoric, the desire to enforce this quit or die mentality and refuse to allow individuals to reduce their risk unless they're willing to give up everything.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
Normally we have an introduction and we say nice things and stuff, but we had technical difficulties, and we're just going to start. We're just going to start the show. Everybody knows Kevin. Say hello to everybody, Kevin.
Hello, everybody, Kevin.
And with us is Dr. Charles Gardner, who many people, especially the active Twitter advocates, are very familiar with his tweeting. But I'm always surprised when somebody says something that I don't know. I've been doing this for 10 years, and it still stuns me, the stuff that I didn't know or that I thought I knew. And a lot of times, a lot of that comes from Charles. So I thought it would be great to bring Charles to you guys, especially the ones that are not on Twitter. I mean, I know everybody isn't as active on Twitter as Kevin, and I'm not as active as Kevin is. But I've gotten the Surgeon General to cry on Twitter, so I don't think Kevin's done that. So at least I have that feather for my cap. But welcome, Charles.
Hey, thank you. Glad to be here. Gentlemen, nice to talk to you. I hope that everyone is safe and healthy. I hope your families are as well.
Well, I mean, I work in healthcare. Obviously, you and I were just talking about that. And I just found out today, the company I work for, we have 3 facilities here in town, and 2 of those have memory care units. And almost every resident in one of my memory care units just tested positive today.
What's a memory care?
It's for dementia and Alzheimer's patients. I work mostly in geriatric medicine. I do a lot of pediatrics too, but mostly geriatrics. And we've gone through this entire pandemic with not a single positive test. We've done everything possible. And apparently one of the employees brought it in from outside because these residents don't leave the facility. That's the only way this could happen. And actually, we've had to send one of them out to the post-acute center here for care because they require more care than what's available to them.
Oh, this is really tragic.
Yeah, it's really, and this is the importance, and we've hammered harm reduction. I mean, that's at the center of what we do is harm reduction, and those little mitigating things: washing your hands, social distancing, mask use when you can't socially distance. Those things, regardless of what crap you read on the internet, they do work. I've been in hot zones.
I'm not sure. I mean, we only have evidence on the masks going back 120 years. I mean, don't you think we need more time?
That may not be settled science. You never know.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand only 120 years.
So, yeah, I mean, it's imperative. And I know that there's people out there that are going to say, well, it limits my freedom. If you're one of those tinfoil hat wearing people that believe the government's out to get you and you believe that they're spying on you, a mask actually will reduce the success of facial recognition software.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
it'll fool the Chinese facial recognition software.
Yeah. So if you're in that camp, you should be fully pro-mask. I mean, literally, that's going to prevent them from identifying you from, the satellite that's watching you and from space. But so, Charles, tell everybody about you.
Some of you may not know that I'm very new to this insane, crazy tobacco control field. And so that only goes back 3 years for me. And it's been a very steep learning curve, and I've learned from everyone on Twitter and everyone in this community, the vape fam. Also learned a great deal from people in the drug harm reduction space over the past 3 years. And that's, it's an incredible process. I have a really strong sense now that if I can make any difference in this field, even if it's tilting the needle a tiny fraction of 1%, I will have saved more lives than in all of my previous incarnations. And those have included, I used to work on the Hill, so I worked for members of Congress, some of whom are very smart, by the way, and very dedicated. And because they are our representatives, some of them are not. And then I spent about 5 years working at the National Institutes of Health. And my role there was it was called a program officer for Africa and the Middle East. And then I spent 5 years as a diplomat in India as the health attaché at the US Embassy. Really, I often say making arranged marriages between Indian and American scientists, and did many of those, and created a half a dozen Indo-US biomedical and behavioral research programs. So like on brain research, HIV/AIDS research, things like that. And ended up at the Rockefeller Foundation for 5 years, which is where I met Derek Yack, who is the president of the Foundation for a Smoke-Free World. And there I was an associate director for health equity. And my job was to manage about $11 million a year in investments in public-private R&D partnerships, research and development partnerships on HIV, TB, malaria, and dengue fever. Mm-hmm. I've had dengue fever, by the way, twice while I was in India, and it's not fun. I had hallucinations and very high fever. So, but I lived, and I've really spent the subsequent years working for the World Health Organization as a senior advisor, and for another foundation which is based in Zurich in Switzerland as a director of child health. So tobacco control, I knew nothing about it. And everything I've done in the past has been what I would call the bread and butter of global health, which is infectious diseases, water sanitation and hygiene, nutrition, child health, maternal health. And here I sit now. Now I'm pretty much up to speed, and it's really scary. And I have to say, looking at what I see every single day in this field is deeply troubling to me, because I really thought that we scientists generate the evidence, vet the evidence, and come up with truth. This field is so far removed from that. I don't know where to start.
Yeah, I mean, from a clinical standpoint, we see the results of past mistakes. As I work in healthcare, we see the long-term results of bad decisions. And when given the opportunity, I was a smoker. I worked in healthcare and I was still a smoker. I knew that it was bad for me and still chose to do it because, and as we learn more about, you don't know nicotine. I don't know if you've seen the film yet.
I have. I watched it 2 nights ago.
As we absorb that content, we're finding out that maybe nicotine isn't bad, but obviously we've known that. We've been preaching that for a long time, that it's not nearly as harmful as the other constituents of smoking. And obviously, Kevin and I were talking about this earlier before you came on, that, there's a phrase a friend of ours that's in vaping advocacy uses quite frequently, and it's nobody wants to hear that their baby is ugly. So, right. Vapors don't want to hear that there could be some sort of negative aspects of what we do. But
I do.
Well, I want to know what it is that I'm bringing into my body, because I've cut bodies open and I've looked inside, and I want to know that what's inside is not horrible. Mm-hmm. And if there's any flaws or anything that we can do to make it better, more safe, I want to know about that. I completely digressed from what I was trying to say. This is something that we're always learning. And like you said, you've only been in this for 3 years, and you're still finding out stuff that I don't know. I've read your tweets and I'm like, oh, you know what? I never thought about that. And I'm sure that if, Mr. Nyora from New York or anybody else tweets something or publishes something that has content that you don't know, you're going to absorb that information. And
the people that I have found most admirable in my career are the people who, they may have fixed ideas, but when they receive new evidence, they're capable of changing their opinions. The outcome may change. And this is a very complex landscape, this tobacco control world. And somebody like David Abrams, who works with Ray Nyora, mm-hmm. Is one of those people who made that transition. The evidence just became overwhelming for him. And this is a man who used to be the director of all behavioral research at the National Institutes of Health. He's not a lightweight.
No.
And
I mean, even, we talked about, we've had Dr. Glover on from New Zealand, And initially, she was one of the people that was not 100% behind this until she did research. And even though she realized that she was mistaken and that there was benefits to this, she put her credentials on the line by, standing up and saying, maybe we're wrong about this.
So this is like people in the church stepping outside of dogma, and they will be attacked. They will be the modern equivalent of burned at the stake. And that needs to stop, of course, but this is going on right now, and she's been attacked. I often think about that transition that happened 400 years ago when Galileo was confronting the church about whether the earth moves or not. And he nearly got burned at the stake himself. He ended up in house arrest for the remainder of his mortal life because he dared to say something that violated the dogma.
Yeah, here's your cup of hemlock, today, for example, I was reading your Twitter. Kevin and I sort of do everything on Twitter now. I barely go on Facebook. And I did like your response to Stan with his Thailand.
I can be a little too strong sometimes when it comes to some people.
Well, we don't call him Dr. Glands. We call him Stan Glands.
Professor.
And a lot of people may not get that, but and I actually did refer to him in one of your tweets yesterday, I believe, as Stan, the serial sex abuse or sexual harasser, Stan the Glands.
So how did you think about how he was portrayed in Aaron Biebert's documentary, You Don't Know Nicotine?
Well, I obviously, in context of the film, obviously I work with a lot of senior citizens, and I work with a lot of people that have, degenerative brain diseases and all sorts of things. And I don't have all the raw footage. I don't know what he said. And I hate to defend him, but you really don't know what's going on. He's befuddled. He admitted, this befuddles me, or I'm befuddled. And obviously I don't know, and I know Aaron quite well. I know Aaron. I know that Aaron's not going to play any tomfoolery with editing and things like that. But the idea that we don't want to spoil the film. I think probably everybody that's in the chat room watched it. But for anybody that hasn't watched it, he's not portrayed as the sharpest tack in the box. And, he goes off on tangents about erectile dysfunction and, he
was talking to you.
Well,
I'm getting
old.
So in the documentary, Stan comes across as a nice guy. No, and
he's not.
He does. And
he may be.
The thing is, and that's not a criticism of Aaron. The thing is, there are people who are diametrically opposed to safer nicotine products.
Yeah.
And most of them, as someone once said, most of them are nice people.
Well, yeah. I'm sure if I was out in a bar and Matt Myers decided to come and have a drink at the bar, and I didn't know who he was, and I sat down and started talking to him, I probably wouldn't realize that he was a crazy old man too. And that's my opinion. You don't have to agree with me on that.
So, and all of them actually want to save lives, right?
Well, it's ideological, though.
They're doing, they think what they're doing is their theory of change is this is the way to save lives. And honestly, I've spent 3 years trying to puzzle out what's really going on in the minds. And both of you are probably well aware of all of the conspiracy theories of the perverse incentives and the what's really going on here. it's really complicated, and it fascinates me. Back in the 1930s, there was a science called racial hygiene. Well, that was utter bullshit. And another in the Soviet Union called Lysenkoism, which is a completely ridiculous rejection of another branch of science. And those areas of science have fallen away because the evidence finally, drove the stake into their heart. And I have to believe that in this field the same will happen.
Are we
right
too
now?
Early?
Right now, we're in the midst of the the vampires is
this is the pitchforks
alive and well.
This is the pitchforks and the torches part
There's
of
that
the show. Obviously, we talk about blind ideology a lot. These people, if it looks like smoke.
That looks like smoke, Patrick.
It's got to be fucking smoke. If it looks like something we don't like, that we know is bad for you, it must be exactly like the thing that we don't like and is bad for you. There's a lot of that, and one of the friends of the show, Logan, who Logan Exhales, you've been interviewed on the Rise and Vape show. And if you are not already watching or listening to the Rise and Vape show, you should listen to Logan. Logan has a really calming voice, and he's pretty spot on, and he reads like a sponge. Like he just constantly reading research materials and stuff. And he posted a tweet today about people like overacting, like when you're vaping around other people or you're out in the world and you take a vape and people are, and they just have such a knee-jerk reaction to something that looks bad, and obviously we've talked about, in 2016, there was a study published that categorically came to the conclusion the vast majority of people believe, 70% of the people believed, when asked, was vaping safer than smoking? 70% of the people responded, yes, vaping is safer than smoking. They repeated that same survey in 2018, and 70% of the people responded just 2 years later that vaping was worse than smoking.
Yeah, so we're becoming more and more misinformed, and we have to lay the blame on accusations about seizures in early 2019, about the 2019 lung injuries that were taking place in the second half of 2019, and now, of course, they're blaming COVID-19 on vaping. It's quite clear that pretty much anything that's harming people will get blamed on vaping at some point, because that's just part of the message. I want to segue here, because I have heard a lot of people writing and saying that as they vape outdoors, they are often approached by people who criticize them and stigmatize them. And I'm wondering if that's something that happens in the Midwest, and I grew up in Michigan and I'm from the Midwest, or if it happens in the heartland where people, in Michigan, we tend to say what we think and think what we say. Here in New York City, where I have lived now for 6 years, it doesn't happen. Nobody has ever approached me. And most of my vaping, it's what was the term? There was some study I was reading today. It was like low impact vaping. I'm not blowing out huge columns of vapor. And so it's not really very noticeable. And sometimes I can stealth vape and there's nothing. But nobody has ever once in many, many years here approached me. But I'm curious to know, like, is this an experience that's very different in other parts of the United States?
Well, Kevin's in Ohio.
Oh man, Ohio, where are you, Kevin?
Just barely north of Dayton.
Oh, I know Dayton very well.
Yeah,
just barely north of there.
My great aunt used to teach first grade there.
Is it this big on the map, or is it this?
Oh no, it's 50 miles from Cincy and 50 or 60 from Columbus, depending on how broad you want to go to Columbus.
Yeah. And I'm in Texas. Texas, I mean, obviously, Texans are a different breed of people. I mean, obviously, we're very outspoken when it's something that we're passionate about. But most people, as long as you're not messing with them, they don't mess with you. So I've never had that experience. I mean, obviously, I work, like I said, I work in healthcare. I don't get to vape all day. I don't take smoke breaks. So I go pretty much, 4 or 5 hours at a time while I'm inside a facility. And the only time I ever vape is like if I'm documenting, if I go outside and sit at the gazebo, because we have courtyards and things where you can go sit and you're outside and I can, get some fresh air and vape and do paperwork or something. And that's when the smokers will come out and smoke. Now, I have had more questions from smokers, from the CNAs and from the nurses and from the people that smoke about vaping than I've ever had about like a Karen walking up to me and starting some sort of argument or issue. I've personally never had that problem. And normally they're nurses or CNAs or people, they're like, well, did that help you quit smoking? These are beneficial, productive conversations. So I've never had that particular thing that Logan had happen to him happen to me. And it could be that, I'm 6 foot tall and I weigh about 250 pounds, that maybe they just don't approach me because they're afraid that I might hurt them or something. I'm a very passive person, but.
You have tattoos, Patrick?
Not visibly.
Oh, okay. Well, there. Yeah.
I work in, I'm one of those old generation people that, most of my clientele, they would look down on me having a neck tattoo or something like that. And they probably.
But you have a goatee, so obviously you look like a bad guy in the movie.
Yes. And I did see your tweet earlier, that is, my wife is from the Philippines. So when you were talking about dengue, I'm quite knowledgeable on that subject too. That she told me one of the reasons why she was hesitant to start dating me when we started was that all the villains on their shows, they will import an American actor, probably like a C, not even B level actor, but like American with a goatee to be the bad guy on their novellas, on their soap operas. So that's kind of funny.
Yes, it is. I used to have a goatee myself, and everybody told me I looked like the bad guy. Kevin, Kevin, you in Ohio, do you get approached by people asking you what the hell you're doing if you have a?
I don't like people, first of all, but it's on occasion, not a lot. I told my mother that I had stopped smoking by vaping, and she said it's still smoking. So it's an automatic thing. Like he started with, you take a puff, it's smoking. I told her that on the phone, but I don't get it very often because I'm going to flip it and tell them why it's different. I'll if I have the opportunity for the conversation, I'll take it. And if they don't care, then this is better than smoking. It keeps me from smoking, and that's usually enough. Some of them get curious, and some of them won't change their minds. Like some tobacco control people.
Well, we need to convey that message that almost everyone you see vaping is an ex-smoker, and they should be applauded, not stigmatized. But we've had a long way to go.
One of the things that I kind of want to talk about, because we've gotten into the researchers and the public health and name only groups, and that's one of the hashtags that we constantly use. For example, when Gottlieb was still at the FDA, and this whole vaping epidemic dialogue sort of resurfaced, because this is not the first time the youth epidemic has been brought up. This has just been the most successful version of that talking point that we've experienced in the last 10 years. One of the things that he used as ammunition for that was the youth tobacco survey. And he came out and started, we have to take action now because the numbers are alarming. But the numbers had not been released yet. We've gotten access to the early data, and the early data is alarming. Well, then he left FDA after he started this mess.
And went to pharma.
And then when the actual data came out, there was a decline in youth usage of these products from the year before.
I'm going to correct you. He left the FDA with the last tweet showing a bag of flavored jelly beans for the new guy.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
But
adults don't like flavors.
We get hit with this whole campaign of anti-vaping rhetoric, and the justification for that was false information about the youth tobacco survey.
Well, it's not, but the thing is, it's not false information. It's misleading information. It's effectively a lie by omission of context. And so if you look at the trend from the National Youth Tobacco Survey, you see teen vaping increased in 2013 and 2014. And organizations like the Campaign for Tobacco-Free Kids began to sound alarms. Teen smoking rates dropped far faster than historical trends in those years. And then, for reasons I don't understand, maybe anti-vaping propaganda, in the years 2015 and 2016, according to that same survey, teen vaping dropped each year. It fell. And teen smoking rates, the decline in teen smoking rates continued, but it went back to the historical trend. It slowed down. But teen vaping in 2017, 2018, and 2019 increased each year. And when they're only telling us that what they call current vaping or the use numbers, which is even one puff in the past 30 days, it sounds very alarming because everyone in the public is going to assume that the numbers they're giving out are every one of those kids is addicted, because obviously nicotine is as addictive as heroin and cocaine. And so the numbers went up. Now, what they're not giving us is the frequent use or the daily use, or if they do that, they give it as a percent of a percent. So you have to do the math. And who does the math? Right? So
you do.
They'll say the percentage of current users who vape frequently or who vape daily is another percentage number, and that looks like a big number. But when you multiply the two percentages, you get, 2019, 4.4% are vaping daily. That's not really a big number. And in fact, from the Youth Risk Tobacco Survey and the Monitoring the Future Survey, we know that about half of that is THC vaping, not nicotine. So we've got that. But the most interesting thing to me is what I saw today, because we know from the CDC data that came out just last month that the National Youth Tobacco Survey covering 2019 to March 2020, so just before the schools closed, showed a 29% drop in current use in just 1 year. And there's a study that came out today that uses, I'm not sure how accurate this can possibly be, but it uses a proxy of Google searches. But it shows another 29% drop. And I'm willing to believe that there was a drop. I just don't, I find it hard to believe it's that huge. But 29% drop from 2019 to March 2020, and another 29% drop from March 2020 to November 2020 in teen vaping. So if you want to call this an epidemic, you're insane. And what we really need to begin to acknowledge is this was a fad. When I was in high school, we had fads.
Bell-bottom jeans.
And they went.
Ooh.
Skateboarding, marbles, we had frisbees. These fads came and went. And this was a fad. That's all it ever was. And it's plummeting. Now, I'm a little concerned what happens when teen vaping plummets, whether teen smoking may rise, because these are obviously product substitutes. Every financial analyst on earth can see that, but nobody in public health can see that. They're still claiming that this is a gateway to smoking.
Yeah.
My question is do they ever report the number of people, the number of youths, for example, that are vaping, that are current users that smoked before they vaped?
Yeah, Peter Hayek, is it Hayek or is it Shahab? So there's a very good study I can share with you that from the UK, which is slightly less insane than the United States on these subjects. They analyzed the 2018 National Youth Tobacco Survey data, and they conclude that only 1% are vaping daily and never smoked. So that 1% is the whole new generation addicted to nicotine. And anytime you see that phrase, you are hearing someone who's deliberately lying or who's just going with the pack and regurgitating what they've been told, which and most of it's that.
Right.
There are some people who know that they're deliberately lying, and that I find very disturbing.
Can you get away with? Is this something that they were getting away with in the 80s with the AIDS epidemic? They were fumbling with the numbers and playing around with people's lives.
Oh, you have to talk to Ethan Nadelman or somebody who's much better versed in that field, or somebody from ACT UP. I do think, by the way, that the vape fam, the tobacco harm reduction community, the safer nicotine community, I prefer safer nicotine, can learn a tremendous amount from that history.
Yeah.
So both the drug harm reduction field and both the activist and the evidence-based approaches that were taken by people in ACT UP. And look, like ACT UP, they were harnessing artists and doing kind of in-your-face art, but they staged demonstrations on the campus of the National Institutes of Health, and they had a sit-in. They invaded Tony Fauci's office.
Yes,
and
they did.
Talked to him, and he listened to them. And if you listen to him in interviews now, he has a lot of respect for them. The problem is nobody's listening to people who use nicotine. We're too stigmatized. But anyway, so I think you talk about the HIV/AIDS crisis, and yeah, there was a lot of, in the very early days of that, you should just say no to sex, and you should, there was nothing about, especially in U.S. international development, there was a big controversy about whether we should be helping poor people in developing countries by distributing condoms and things like that. That's a harm reduction product, by the way. I think the most interesting thing is methadone for people who are using opioids, because every single one of exactly the same arguments are used when it comes to safer nicotine products. Just think of the children. You're just switching one addiction for another. It's a gateway to more harmful substances. It's just normalizing bad behavior, and you go on and on and on. It's like from the same playbook. And all of those arguments with methadone were wrong. Demonstrably wrong, proven wrong by the evidence, scientific evidence. But it wasn't the scientific evidence that swayed minds. It was actually the voices of users eventually reaching some journalists, and eventually through them and directly reaching some politicians.
Yeah, I mean, Ethan Nadelman, and he's done some fairly good speeches about vaping. Like he's ready to be recruited. Like we should be tapping him. He's respected. He has a voice. People listen to him. We as advocates, and I've talked about this numerous times on the show, we failed when we started this as a political issue and choosing a red or a blue color, because naturally a lot of the topics that we really are cousins to are topics that are more liberal. I mean, I'm a conservative gun-toting sort of guy, but I will talk to any politician. But the thing is, we turned this into a very partisan thing, and I don't know that we can't unpull that trigger now. Really, I mean, but we need to spend some time interfacing with people that we wouldn't normally interface with to get policy that is sound and safe for this industry. I'm gonna upset Kevin, because right now, obviously Biden's transition team is sort of forming up, and we already know some of his advisors that are on the transition team. And one of the people that is on that transition team is not a vape friendly person, and he's also in the health arena. He is the ex-Surgeon General Vivek Murthy, who we've had in an adversarial position, and there's rumors that he might be on the short list for Health and Human Services.
He already has his copy of the
he has a copy of Nicotine Without Smoke.
Yeah.
I have a photograph of
copy.
Greggy giving it to him from years ago while he was still in uniform as the Surgeon General. And he was one of those first people that he was one of the loudest people during the Obama administration that there was an epidemic and this was dangerous to youth. And I won't lie, I'm not a scientist. I mean, I'm sort of well versed in the human body. I'm not going to say that nicotine is safe for kids to have, not in the concentrations that we inhale. It's not good for them, period. So, that's not a lie. But obviously we need to not throw the baby out with the bathwater. We need to figure out a way to offer these products to adults as a lifeline while still preventing kids from having them and not limiting the adult choice. That is a tightrope.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have, Patrick, I have immense respect for any principled conservative. And when I worked in Washington, I knew many and had many great friends there, people I would go to Civil War battlefields with and review the history. And we had great conversations. But everybody here should know, I am a liberal. I am as Will Rogers said, I belong to no organized political party. I'm a Democrat. And the vape fam is a big tent, and it needs to be that. And we need to get beyond this red-blue shit because this is about saving lives. And we need to start thinking about, okay, if there's a shift in the political landscape, what are the arguments that can help convince someone on the left to understand tobacco harm reduction? And these are people who already want to decriminalize some what have previously been illegal substances, cannabis, psilocybin, magic mushrooms. Mm-hmm. That's moving along. That's like a freight train. And they understand methadone. They understand drug harm reduction. They understand safe needle exchanges and safe injection sites. And they understand condoms. And these arguments are already made to just get us to a point where they're able to understand that there's something similar happening here in the context of 480,000 Americans dying every year from smoking. Still more than COVID-19, though it's catching up. And so we need to start reaching out to those politicians, because if this battle is just the people in the vape industry think that they're okay because the Senate is going to maybe stay Republican and the House, so there's only a 5-seat difference between Republicans and Democrats, and they can quell any major anti-vaping legislation there with a few Democrats who no, we need to convince them all of the facts, the truth. And the truth is, these things are vastly safer than smoking, and they help smokers quit. And this needs to be said in a way that they can understand, and finding that language is key.
Yeah. I mean, I've been around long enough to have been here when we were part of the omnibus funding bills that we had built, safe vaping or pro vaping language in the omnibus. And we were not important enough to not be bargained out. Like, obviously, at no point did we have enough Republican support to keep that language in. And we didn't do anything to engage with the Democrats enough to make it important enough for them to not force it out. I mean, we were negotiated out 3 times. So this has not been an important enough topic for any of them people. Obviously, when they're negotiating the omnibus, it's the whips, it's the Senate, it's the leaders, it's the party people at the top in a small room negotiating that out. It's not a full House and a full Senate to begin with. So, they're whittling away each person's pet projects. We're going to let you have that, but you got to get rid of that. And, that's all it is this is important for me, and I'm not going to vote yes if you leave that in. And, we've been negotiated out 3 times over the last 10 years that I can remember, at least 3 times.
You're not petting my peeve, I'm not petting yours.
So, we have to make this important enough, and I know that there's people that during the primaries, during the Democratic primaries, they went and said, I'm in this industry. Let me talk to you about this industry. And they actually had conversations with these people, with the big players, with Warren, with Sanders, with Biden's people. So we need to do more of that. And, you may be so partisan that you might not be the one to do it. We have to do what we can. I mean, I know that you're in the people that are in. Kevin and I are just consumers. I don't collect $1 for doing this show.
That's all I am now. I mean,
regular people.
I am just an ex-smoker who uses nicotine vape products myself.
So
we're all in the same boat. But the problem is that anyone who thinks the way Kevin thinks, and Patrick thinks, and Charles thinks, is assumed to be working for Big Vape or Big Tobacco.
Mm-hmm.
That's a real challenge, and it doesn't matter what you tell them, because we're all tarred with the same brush.
Yeah, and the sad part is, because we have a lot of friends that listen to the show from New Zealand, from Australia, from other parts of the world. This last 2-week period, we've had these in Australia. They have had these Senate Select Committee on Tobacco Harm Reduction meetings. They've had 2 televised meetings, and they've invited people to come in and talk. And I mean, obviously, you can read the room by watching it and tell that there's a few people on there that already had the information brought to them. They already made their decision. They had, Dr. Mendelsohn and Dr. Wodak were on there, and every time,
great advocates.
Every time one of the pro-vaping people came on, it was really funny because this one senator would always bring up the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control, and due to the fact that Australia is a signatory to Framework FCTC, that they had to, they would ask this question: well, do you get money from big tobacco?
Alex's response was brilliant.
Yes, that was amazing. And we've played it twice on the show before, so we're not going to play it again. But they're importing American talking points for their hearings. So we hear about the American youth vaping epidemic in Australia, and they're using that as a justification in Australia.
The $210 million a year that Bloomberg Philanthropies and the Truth Initiative are spending largely, all on tobacco control, but largely now to fight against safer nicotine products doesn't just harm Americans. The United States is now the epicenter of a misinfodemic that is spreading worldwide. And they're picking up the talking points. They're copying and pasting language from documents that come out of these Bloomberg-funded NGOs and from the Truth Initiative. It is just horrendous, and it's going to kill people.
Yeah,
I have these fantasies of a time somewhere in the future that the number of people who die because of this will be quantifiable.
Mm-hmm.
It will be quantifiable,
and their blood will be on people's hands.
The number
Bans,
of
restrictions, taxing.
Yeah. Okay. So all of those make e-cigarettes or safer nicotine products less accessible, less acceptable to the user, and less affordable to the user, and thus reduce the smoking cessation efficacy of these products. These products are not the be all and end all. They should be just one in an armamentarium of possibilities to help people quit.
Yes.
But we're going to cut this one out, and have like 40 countries have banned these things entirely. San Francisco has banned them entirely, and what happens when they do that? Cigarette sales increase. This is the banging your head against the wall thing, but our American perverse incentives that include the master settlement agreement and the $714 million a year extracted as protection money from the tobacco companies funneled.
Say that real slow again. Protection money funneled to the National Heart, Lung, and Blood Institute, the National Cancer Institute, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, for research, all focused on finding harms. Well, I won't say all. Let's say 95% of it. Here you go, researcher. Here's your $10 million grant. Please find some harms. And they'll find harms. Mm-hmm. And they'll blast mice with unbelievable levels of vapor or a dry hit or cells in a culture or tissue explants, and they'll blast them, and they'll show changes, and they'll call them harms, and on and on it goes. We are a juggernaut of anti-vaping evidence, and it is evidence. They're generating evidence. But nobody's going out to people like us and asking us, well, how are you doing? Is your health improved?
No.
How's your asthma? How is your COPD? Are you having lung infections anymore? No.
You're an anecdote.
There we go.
Oh yeah.
That's anecdotal. The one of the senators in that Australian hearing, or one of the scientists, I can't remember anymore, but basically said there's no value in the testimonials of the users because they're not. It's not science.
Yeah, right. But they'll roll out three in the United States. They'll roll out 3 kids who claim that they were vaping and addicted to vaping. And of course they quit. Like, okay, I guess it wasn't that hard to quit. And how, terrible it was for them. They couldn't concentrate, blah, 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 blah. And so the anecdotes worked just fine for them. Right? So there's 13,681 anecdotes on the CASA website, testimonials. And that should grow, by the way. People in the vape fam should go there and they should add their testimonials. That should be 1 million people, not 13,000, not only 13,000, because we've all had the same experiences. These, unscientific Twitter surveys I've done over the last year and a half, I don't think they're that valid, but it's pretty indicative. And I was asking questions that were what I wish scientists would ask. There's plenty of people. We have 14 years of lived history, of lived experience, and millions of people doing it. Nobody's saying it. It's right there in the CDC data. At least 4.6 million Americans have quit smoking with nicotine vaping products.
Isn't that the goal?
Yeah, you would think. And there's probably at least another 1.5 million that quit smoking cigarettes and then quit vaping.
Yes.
So that takes you up to around 6 million people quit smoking with these products. How is this not news? It's just stunning.
I know this might, I hope it doesn't melee you, but when I see the words smoke-free by 2050 or 2035 or 2025 I've got recently, I don't remember where, how do they expect to do that if they don't embrace this? I mean, I know you can use patches, and I just recently found something that said you can increase your nicotine with patches, and it probably would work. I never thought of that. But how do they expect to do that? They're going to be dead and gone before that happens at 2050, and it pisses me off.
So let's go back to the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control that Patrick mentioned, FCTC. They that Framework Convention includes a number of key recommendations, and to put it in the most negative sense, one of the recommendations is let's increase stigma on smokers. But let's set that aside. The recommendations are outdoor smoking bans, indoor smoking bans, advertising bans, raising taxes, and increasing stigma. And the thing is, those policies work. In the countries that have implemented them that had very high smoking rates to begin with, the smoking rates declined dramatically. That's a good thing. And safer nicotine products are not an alternative to that. They complement it. But because what happens is when those policies work and you get down to, let's say, 15% or 14% of the population is now smoking, what you have is, this is like economics 101, declining marginal returns on added investments in stigma, taxes, bans. You have, by definition, the people who were least able or least willing to quit. It's that 13 or 14 or 15%. And how do we get to those people? Well, maybe a product that helps a very significant fraction of smokers quit by accident. Nobody quit by accident with a nicotine patch or Chantix or nicotine gum or
you just saved that quote.
or counseling or acupuncture or whatever else you want to try. This is a product that, it's crazy because when I did that Twitter survey, 40% of the people who had quit smoking completely with nicotine vapes said they quit by accident. I think that's an unbelievably high number. There you go.
48 hours.
Well, I know quite a few people. I know quite a few people who were in a situation. Fig is in the chat room. Fig was going to a wedding or somewhere that he didn't want to smoke. He couldn't smoke. So he got one to use while he was gone, while he was traveling or whatever, and then found that he didn't need the cigarette anymore. He could just use the vape. Obviously, there's, I promised my wife that I would quit when we got married. And I've told the story here a bunch of times. And I was actually trying to quit, and I did it in one day. Like, there was no dual use. There was, I'm going to use this. I'm going to push through until I get used to it. And I did, and I love it. It gives me what I need or what I want.
How did you survive the vomiting and the headaches and the depression, the mood swings, the what else? And the erectile dysfunction.
36 milligram of nicotine, baby. Nah, yeah, that's what I started at. Actually, it was 36. That was 10 years ago. But
you ratchet down.
I'm at 12. I've got to 12.
Almost everybody tapers down. This is not something you do with heroin. You do not taper down.
No. And I did see a tweet on that you were thanking somebody for that had been a heroin addict, and refuted the BS that nicotine is as addictive in this form as heroin. I don't know, obviously most people, and I have no experience with heroin use. So I don't know. I mean, I've treated patients that have had that addiction, that have had that problem. I know people that have had that problem, and none of them have ever told me that quitting vaping was harder than quitting heroin. Not a single person. Or quitting smoking. I mean, obviously we have just my own edification. When I was a smoker, the first thing I did in the morning was light a cigarette. Literally, I mean, after coughing up all the crap that was in my lungs overnight, then I would light a cigarette. Now, as a vapor, I get up, I go to the bathroom, I brush my teeth, I do all my stuff, I grab my vape and head to the car to go to work, and then I have my first vape. It could be an hour. It could be 2 hours some mornings that I don't have my first puff. So you can't tell me that Jones, I'm jonesing for a cigarette. I don't have that. I could give it, I could push it off in the morning. I could go a while.
One of the things that I will never forget in talking to people on the drug harm reduction field. And we at the foundation, we went through a kind of learning exercise that I organized, where we brought some of those people together and to try to understand some of the lessons from that. We are now where they were 30 years ago, right? So it was a long slog and it was a long battle for them. But one of the things that totally shocked me, because all I know about heroin addiction or heroin use or heroin dependence is based on Hollywood movies. Mm-hmm. They said numerous among them told me, you have no idea how many people are using heroin and are functional users. Mm-hmm. That was quite a shock to me. And I have no reason to disbelieve them. This whole, addiction, very pejorative, very negative term, unless you're using it like I'm addicted to chocolate or I'm addicted to video games. So we use it colloquially and lazily. And addiction to nicotine. That all goes back to the 1988 Surgeon General report, right? And even the authors of that report debated whether they should say dependence or addiction. Mm-hmm. And they intentionally chose the word addiction because they thought it would help discourage people from initiating smoking. They thought that It's more like public health in tobacco control has moved to messaging based on focus groups rather than science, rather than evidence. It's the messaging. So I'm starting to ramble right now, but there's so many issues here, but you don't need a vape the minute you wake up in the morning. And that is one of the key signs of addiction, or dependence is the better term here. You're not dependent. You've ratcheted down the level of nicotine you're using in your vape liquids. That's also not a sign of dependence. Yeah, I'm dependent on coffee. I mean, we always say that, okay, love coffee. By the way, the withdrawal symptoms from nicotine are pretty much identical to the withdrawal symptoms from nicotine. Caffeine and nicotine, they're the same. And so I don't know what we're talking about here, right? We have a thing that provides pleasure. It increases focus and attention, nicotine. It also has numerous therapeutic benefits in Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, ulcerative colitis, ADHD, for people who are suffering from schizophrenia, weight loss. We have an epidemic of obesity, right? Not you, yes. Patrick.
He brought it up. He pointed right at me when he said that.
Well, I can't see you from the neck down. You're fine as far as I can tell. And okay, and if you stop nicotine, you might gain 5 pounds. All right. Do you know that ballerinas have known this for about 150 years?
And supermodels.
And yeah, they were,
and swimmers,
until recently, heavy smokers to keep the weight off. It's like, why? So anyway, in tobacco control, we're not allowed to say those things. And if you do say those things, you must be a shill for big tobacco.
Wait. You're not allowed to say those things. You're pressured. You're ostracized if you do.
Absolutely.
Well, I mean, to go back to the term addict. So, I mean, yes, we do make jokes about that word when you brought up chocoholic and stuff like that. But that word itself is a cringe word. Like if you tell somebody you're an addict, you need, specifically, we want to separate you from the rest of society. We want to push you over there. We've been doing that with smokers for the last, 10, 15 years or whatever, by making them go to the smoker's hut or go to curb it, with San Francisco. Go to the curb. You go over there because we don't want you to be near us.
It's a term of stigma. And ironically, there is some research showing that if you tell a smoker that they're addicted, it actually makes it harder for them to quit. Mm-hmm. Because in those little attempts to quit, when there's a failure and they try again and they fail, they blame it on their addiction. It's not, they lose a sense of agency. Now, the evidence is not really strong there, but I mean, this is in the "it just stands to reason" school of thinking.
I mean, obviously, we know that cessation benefits from support.
Yeah.
If there's no support, cessation isn't as successful. So, for example, traditional NRT, the best percentage that you get is when you get traditional NRT and clinical support
and counseling, right?
Right.
Absolutely.
So if people already are, and we talk about nicotine addiction, Newhouse, we love Dr. Paul Newhouse here. We've been talking about Paul Newhouse for about 5-10 years. Well, we've been doing this show. I've been specifically for about 7-8 years now. I read a wonderful quote from him in an article, and I screen share it and stuff years ago. But essentially it says, nicotine itself is not addictive because I've been injecting it into people for nearly 20 years, and none of the people that I injected into ever come back and ask for more. And I'm gonna spoil part of the film real quick, because specifically they address the rats. They address the harming animals by injecting them with nicotine, and he says it's not reinforcing enough by itself. So the only way
those rats have to be very laboriously trained to push a lever to get nicotine.
Well, they specifically say in the film, the only way we can get them to push the lever is to stress them out, is to get them agitated and scared and stressed, and then they'll hit the button.
Right. And people need to understand this. I wish somebody could generate a GIF showing two rats in two separate Skinner boxes pushing levers for cocaine versus nicotine. Like every aspect of this addiction claim would just vanish, because the rat who they have a plug going into their brain, it's delivering the cocaine directly, or heroin, whichever. They'll press that lever until they drop, because it feels good.
Yeah.
For nicotine, they'll press the lever about 3 times an hour. If they're
they're stuck in a box,
and they're stuck in a box, right? So, and if they're only getting saline, which is the control, they press it about once an hour. Now, this is only with a trained rat that's been trained to think that it might get food if it pushes the lever. So they have to think that, know that ahead of time. And then there's great research showing that actually, even with heroin and cocaine, the rats barely press a lever if you put them in a social group.
Great.
They're much more interested in grooming each other and having sex and eating and all the other things rats do. And occasionally they'll go over and hit the lever. So we have no idea how stressed a rat is if it's stuck in a box all by itself.
They're very communal animals.
But I think you need to take it back to humans. Jed Rose is one of the premier researchers in this field. He invented the nicotine patch. He co-invented Chantix for smoking cessation. He's devoted his entire career to helping smokers quit. And he did a study a few years back where he gave smokers intravenous nicotine to a level that would reach their brain identical to what they would get from a cigarette, and they did not lose their craving. They still craved a cigarette. When he gave them nicotine-free cigarettes, they lost most of their craving. And here it gets to, what are people really addicted to when they smoke? Is it just the nicotine, right? Or is it, let's accept that smoking is a complex behavior. And people are addicted to the pleasure that they get from the hand-mouth ritual, from the oral and olfactory and visual stimuli, the throat hit. If you give somebody a low-tar cigarette, they don't like it as much. So they're even addicted to the tar, which is actually what's killing them. Mm-hmm. And they're addicted to the monoamine oxidase inhibitors in cigarette smoke, which are powerful antidepressants that accentuate dependence on nicotine.
Well, they tickle the pleasure centers of your brain quite well.
There we go. So it's
the
all
ammonia that amplifies the nicotine.
We shouldn't have to be the people telling tobacco controllers what's really going on. We who smoked, we who vape, shouldn't be the ones telling them what's real, but none of them are going back to the foundational science and really looking at it, because they're just riding off of a kind of a dogmatic approach. This is linear reductionist thinking when you say nicotine is the sole cause of smoking.
Well, I mean, literally I shouldn't say most science in this field is comparing vaping to abstinence, to nothing. Users to never users.
Right.
They never compare smoking as the starting point and then transitioning to vaping. They hardly ever seriously look at vaping or smoking versus vaping or vaping versus smoking. It's always smoking versus abstinence or vaping versus abstinence. Well, of course, doing nothing is going to be the best, but they never start out looking at this as a continuum. They never, that's a Gottlieb word. Gottlieb used that word all the time, a continuum of risk.
Right.
And they never look at it that way. I mean, obviously the puritanical people, the prohibitionists, it's always, nothing. Here's smoking versus nothing. Oh, that's awful. Here's vaping versus nothing. Well, it's still not perfect compared to nothing.
And they're building a narrative. The ants are building a narrative now, which is focused on almost everybody who vapes is a dual user. And especially in the 18 to 24 age group, a lot of those people, it was probably like 20%, never smoked. So they're not willing to admit that many of them would have smoked if e-cigarettes had never been invented. And we are, as we succeed in eliminating smoking, we are going to get increasingly to a point where people are vaping recreationally. And then we need to start talking about, and all of public health is a balance of benefits and risks. Every drug that the FDA authorizes, puts on the market, every COVID-19 vaccine is weighed by experts for the balance of the potential harms and the benefits. So we need to start talking about, okay, you're vaping and you never smoked. Well, okay, should you go back and smoke some cigarettes and then it's okay for you to vape? But what about the fact that you've just lowered your risk of Parkinson's disease by 60%? What about the fact that your risk of Alzheimer's disease is dramatically reduced? Or if you begin to develop it, excuse me, the symptoms may be delayed dramatically by nicotine ingestion. This is a neuroprotective substance. It's a natural product, comes from a plant, and it has a weight loss and other therapeutic benefits. We need to start focusing on that because nicotine's addictiveness and its therapeutic benefits is one key card in this house of cards that they have erected to undermine safer nicotine products in general, which includes smokeless tobacco like snus, as well as vaping and heated tobacco products, which I rarely talk about. And nicotine is the key thing. And for this, I have to compliment and give Aaron Biebert great acknowledgement that he went after that in the documentary, and he did it very gently, and he did it very politely, and he did it in a way that was not confrontational. I think my take, and I've told him this, is I guess you're not trying to convince anyone, Aaron. You're just trying to raise questions. You're just trying to get people to think outside of the echo chamber that they're in. And for that, I think he did a great job with that.
On both sides.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, and one of the things that we as vapors need to acknowledge is that, of course, this is not perfect. And you're in a position where you could, because you talked about something I think is hilarious, is that due to the fact that vaping exists, we can't really look into a crystal ball and say, well, if vaping never existed, would these people have smoked, right?
Right.
But look into a crystal ball.
We can say with certainty some of them would have.
Well, of course. Kids that are going to experiment with this would probably have experimented with that. Risky behavior is a personality trait. Kids that drink probably are going to be more prone to kids that smoke. That's just the way it is. I mean, I'm Irish, so I'm predisposed to be an alcoholic, and I think I've just demonstrated quite well on this show that I am. I'm a very high functioning, and it doesn't interfere with any part of my life. But I enjoy drinking, and I will continue to do so when I choose to do so. But we also, as somebody from public health, somebody that is more knowledgeable in the health arena of the human body, if you were to be completely honest, what is potentially bad about vaping?
Oh, good question. So for the smoker who switches to e-cigarettes, the evidence is overwhelming. Their lung health improves dramatically in relatively a short space of time, within a month or two. For a smoker who quits cold turkey, cardiovascular risk takes about 10 years to go back to something close to never smoker level. If you quit smoking before the age of 40, it really does go back to never smoker level. The e-cigarette cancer potential, so 3 things kill you with the smoking. It's cancer, it's heart disease, and lung disease. So cancer is the other one. There are numerous studies showing that the lifetime cancer risk from a nicotine vape product is orders of magnitude lower, 100 times to 450 times lower than smoking a cigarette. But I will note that anti-vaping researchers are building a case against some flavorings. So the cinnamon flavor may be a little more likely to react with other ingredients in the vapor. And it's not COVID. And produce some carcinogens, vanillins in some flavors. This is why there's a need for product safety standards. Everyone in the vape fam wants to know. Everyone in the vape fam wants to know what's safer and what's the safest. And so a couple of things here. First of all, in terms of devices and liquids, we have to acknowledge that if regulators let innovators in the industry continue to improve their product, continuous improvement, things get safer. Your car is vastly safer than the car that your grandfather or great-grandfather drove in 1920. In terms of miles driven, the automobile deaths and accidents have plummeted at a steady rate because cars got safer. We have anti-lock brakes now. We have airbags. We have seat belts. We have all the what is it called? Crash, crumple, whatever's.
You have crumple zones.
Crumple zones, and air travel has gotten safer in the same way. We need to let the e-cigarettes get safer. We need to have some standards for the vape liquids. I think it's plausible that there could be some long-term harms from some flavors and less so from others, but there's just no way compared to the harm of smoking that any of those harms come anywhere near to what you get from smoking. And let's not forget, we say smoking is deadly, but the fact is smoking shortens the lives of 50% of lifelong smokers by about 10 years. It's not an instant death sentence, nor is it a certain death sentence. And when we talk about reducing harms by 95% or more than 95% or 99% when it comes to lifetime cancer risk, that's the starting point. And so we're reducing harms not to zero, but to something that really is no longer going to be measurable. I mean, you can look at secondhand smoking harms. Secondhand smoke causes harms. There's no question about that. The best evidence, and you need to look at 400,000 people and follow them for decades. The best evidence shows that secondhand smoke from a cigarette increases the risk of lung cancer in never smokers by 30%. Only if they live with a smoker for many decades. And it's time dependent. So the longer you live with that smoker, the higher your risk. What does it mean to increase lung cancer risk 30%? It means there will be 6 more lung cancers out of 10,000 people than would have been expected otherwise. Right? So when you reduce the level of harms as much as it appears to be, I mean, it's possible we're all wrong, right, about e-cigarette vapor. But based on the toxicology of the vapor, the biomarkers in people who switch from smoking to vaping, when you decrease the harms that much, orders and orders of magnitude, we're dealing with a level of harms that are no longer going to be measurable in populations. And
now,
so that, but they'll still try to find harms, but they're really not. They haven't gone away, but they're not measurable.
Yeah, and obviously we live in a day and age where meta studies and meta analysis of stats and things like that get published all the time. And we need to be aware, especially people like me that smoked for 25 years, or Kevin that smoked for 80 years because he's old. He started smoking when he was like 5 years old or something.
You look so young, Kevin.
I tried. It was 9.
Because we smoked, we still have some risk of adverse effect over time, even though we quit. At some point, they're going to do a study.
Patrick, did you quit before the age of 40?
Right 38.
And how long ago was that?
10 years.
So that's a good point. According to the huge studies, we know with absolute certainty that your risk of smoking-related cancer, heart and lung disease is now equal to the level of a never smoker.
Woo-hoo.
Unless there are harms from vaping.
Right.
Kevin?
7 years.
7 years ago?
Yeah. I got to do math. 51, 50, 40.
Right, but you're only 47 now. So, okay. So,
so I was 45.
It takes about 10 years for your risk to go down to as low as it's going to get. You're nearly there.
I'll take my chances.
But that's assuming that there are no new risks from vaping nicotine.
I'll take my chances.
I'm waiting for the glut of studies to come out in 10 years or so that shows all these people that got lung cancer from smoking, but were vaping.
Right.
And now they're gonna say, oh well, see, we were right. All these people that vaped got cancer.
Well, there's 68 million of us right now.
Yeah,
according to what's it called? The knowledge, action, change. The global state of tobacco harm reduction.
Yeah.
So 68 million, that's a lot of people. And I know that there are some people who've been vaping for as long as 14 years now. The damn thing is that nobody asks us how we're doing.
Nobody cares.
I mean, look, the two of you, when you quit smoking and shifted to nicotine vaping, what happened to the number and severity of your lung infections?
I haven't had. I used to get bronchitis every year as a smoker. I haven't had one since I quit smoking. Period. I did get influenza A last year, but that's not the same thing.
0.
And
I didn't have a cough or anything with that. I just had a fever for 3 days.
This is a near universal experience. More than 90% of smokers who switch to nicotine vaping have this experience. And 23% of them claim, they think, they have fewer lung infections than the never smokers around them. That would be an interesting thing to test, because what they think, it may be wrong, but what they think is that they're protected.
Yes. So first, Chugga told me to tell you hello.
Hi, Chugga.
Oh, quite a few did.
Because I've been literally looking at this monitor and not this monitor. Normally, we use a different platform that throws the chat right to the side of the stream so that we can actually see it all on one window. But we had technical problems. So there's
on my laptop. I'm to blame.
I'm not gonna point any fingers. So Fig says that Kevin and I don't count because we both vape tobacco flavors.
But we don't like Fig, so it doesn't matter.
That's true. Dan Donahue said that we need to talk about carbon monoxide.
Yeah.
As a talking point, because there's no carbon monoxide in I don't believe there's any carbon monoxide, depending on what flavors you vape, and we could throw some stuff into a mass spec somewhere to see what the byproducts are, but by and large it's got to be a lot less than in a cigarette.
I've always thought it was zero because there's no combustion. Now there are some anti-vaping research papers that claim to find carbon monoxide, but it is
orders of magnitude less than smoking, blah blah blah. And so carbon monoxide is one of the key causes of cardiovascular problems in smokers. So if you're cutting that out, which you are almost entirely cutting out with nicotine vaping, that takes away a big chunk of the risks right there. Yeah. So I mean that should be something that we incorporate as a talking point when approaching policymakers about health policy with regards to vaping, because I've never even thought about it. I mean, I don't have a PhD behind my name in any health capacity. Well, I don't have a PhD behind my name for any capacity, but
PhD just stands for piled higher and deeper, Patrick.
No, that's true. I've worked with a lot of PhDs, so I've been in digs all over the world with PhDs that I would like to bury them in the holes that we were digging, but I'm not talking about that topic today. But yeah, I mean, there's always, and I'm always willing to listen to people's suggestions and absorb the ones and add them to my toolbox. Because we have to try something new, Charles. We've been playing this game. I mean, I've been one of the people playing this game for a decade now. I mean, I started vaping in 2010, became very active in 2011 in the advocacy world, formed 501c4, C5 with a bunch of guys and became the vaping militia years ago. I have my dog tags right here. If anybody, that's way before your time. But I've been around and been doing this for 10 years. And, I'm always railing against doing the same things over and over again. But that never gets incorporated into action. We have to do different shit now.
Well, okay. So nothing's going to happen until we get outside of our own echo chamber. That's for sure. And I think that what the other main thing that I learned from the drug harm reduction folks, incredibly admirable people, is that this whole world works the opposite of what I thought, the way I thought it worked. And I thought, okay, scientists generate evidence and that informs policy, and then public health improves. And they've all told me that's completely back-assward. You have to change hearts and minds first. And we're not going to do that if we're just all talking to each other. We have to get out of our echo chamber. We should get You Don't Know Nicotine, the documentary, out of the echo chamber, get it to people who might be willing to listen and think, oh, I didn't know that nicotine doesn't cause cancer and doesn't cause heart disease and doesn't cause lung disease, that it might have some therapeutic benefits and so on. We need to just begin to raise some questions. But the other lesson is that it's just, there's no magic bullet. It's going to be a long, long battle to change hearts and minds, to convince public opinion, to shift public opinion, to get the needle to tilt little by little by little. We can all help. But the only reason e-cigarette use is increasing in the United States now is just by word of mouth. It is very definitely not based on what public health people are telling the public. And through word of mouth, we need to, I do talk to people. I talk to people in the elevator. I talk to people on the street. I ask questions. And people are more aware than I might have given them or assumed, I guess, at the start. Aware that there might be some questions around smoking and COVID-19, or risk of infection with the coronavirus, for example. A lot of people are aware that there are some questions there that deserve attention. With e-cigarettes, the troubling thing is that a lot of people just, in the general public, they're already primed not to believe public health, which undermines every aspect of public health when they do have something that they need to tell us, like wearing a mask.
Well, I mean, the mask thing doesn't help when people in respectable positions. I mean, obviously,
don't go there.
Don't start there. Don't start with me.
I'll mention somebody else. I'll mention somebody else. I mean, not only the Twitter target, but even Dr. Fauci was on TV last February saying that we don't need to wear masks, that it's not coming here. Well, maybe it was January. He was on 60 Minutes, either last February or last January, saying at this time, masks aren't going to do anything. People don't need to wear masks.
At that time, it was probably a correct statement. But by the time you get into March, April, we were getting the first round of infections.
Well, yeah,
at that time, public health leaders knew that masks were protective and that we'd all be better off if everybody had one. But they wanted to ensure that those masks were available to first responders, which is a perfectly laudable goal, right? If they had just told us,
if they had to couch the dialogue to say, you know what, masks are important, but please don't go out and panic buy them because the first responders need them or the frontline healthcare people need them, I think it would have been accepted more broadly.
So they don't understand that they're undermining their future arguments. And this is a problem for us because a lot of what public health is telling us right now is demonstrably wrong when it comes to nicotine vaping. And our response is to point out where they're wrong, but we're undermining them. We're undermining their authority in everything else they said. So it's a difficult row to hoe.
That's both of us are agricultural or farmer people, rural people. We're both country folk.
I grew up in small town Michigan. I'm not too far from there. I used to break into the farmer's field and steal the sweet corn. So
he's way further into the field than I am.
But
with my friends.
Yeah, we need to. I mean, obviously, yes, we need to call. I mean, I hate to say it, but we got to call them out when obviously they're mistaken or just lying. That does diminish the value of their entire dialogue when it comes to everything else, because if we're disrespecting them about this, then we're pulling their power away when it comes to that. I agree with you. I understand what you're saying.
I think the best way to respond to the public health folks, though, is respectfully and with evidence. I will say, and nobody's going to want to hear this, but some of us in the vape fam are a little too strident. We're understandably angry because people are trying to kill us, but they don't know they're trying to kill us. They don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I joked a while ago that I made Jerome cry because he was. I mean, obviously, Kevin. I'm not going to share screen it now, but I tweeted him during the lung injury problems last year. And I said, why are you not testing these people for substance abuse? Why are you, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like,
I remember that.
And I'm like, I'm not asking you to do, because he suggested that I was telling him that we should surreptitiously drug test these people. And I was like, no. The doctor or the nurse comes in the room, says the doctor's ordered some labs to test what's in your blood. You don't have to be sneaky about it, but we're relying on self-reporting when the vast majority of people who were suffering these lung injuries were underage or using in states where it's illegal. So they're not motivated to tell the truth. You're going to help me. You're going to help me regardless. So I'm not going to tell you that I was vaping illicit THC cartridges that I bought from some dude in the park out of the back of his van.
So I remember seeing a peer-reviewed research article about a year ago showing that if you ask 100 cannabis users whether they use cannabis, only 85% of them will admit it. Even if they're presented with the positive test results from their own urine, 15% of them will deny it.
Yeah.
Why? Because they might lose their jobs, because it's illegal where they live, or because, in the case of younger people, maybe their parents are standing around the bed in the hospital or whatever. And what percentage of people got what the CDC called EVALI and said that they were not vaping THC? 15%. And so, there's so many lines of evidence. That's another rabbit hole we probably shouldn't go down because, but I've written a lot about that. I've written a number of blogs about that. It's just like it's another nail in the coffin of this kind of constant drumbeat of misinformation.
It's huge.
I mean, it was preceded by the whole thing about seizures, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I don't want to, because I know that I don't have any respect for that man as a clinician or as a physician. I mean, he's an anesthesiologist, but I mean, obviously in his role as the head of public health in Indiana, the Department of Public Health in Indiana, like he's responsible for the deaths of maybe not deaths, but the infection. He helped create the biggest HIV outbreak in modern, the last 10 years by aggressively pushing against safe injection sites.
Yeah, so my comments were not targeted to or directed toward Jerome Adams, the Surgeon General, and
the Surgeon Private.
I don't know that history. I believe I may have heard some arguments in that direction. So Pence comes from Indiana, doesn't he?
Yes. I don't want to say nepotism, but that was
they're chums.
They're buddies. And obviously when Pence was governor of Indiana, he promoted gay conversion therapy camps, which, I mean, I don't care what you do. As long as you're happy and it's not hurting anybody, I don't care what you do. If, we shouldn't demonize people for being different. And he's a very religious person. And I believe that, it's perfectly fine that you're a religious person, but that does not, I mean, there's a fucking line, and you don't bring your religion into your office. Period. I'm a libertarian, so, I'm a worthless, crazy libertarian. So,
how many vapors do you think voted libertarian based strictly on?
Obviously, looking at the candidates' numbers nationwide, not that many. I mean, really, I mean, I don't know what the ultimate percentage was of the popular vote that was given to her, but Gary Johnson was the candidate in the last election cycle, and he got about 5 or 6% of the popular vote total. I could look it up real quick. But
what did you think of Jacob Greer's argument?
Well, I mean, anytime that you're voting a third party in this country,
you're taking a vote away from somebody
else. Yeah, and I mean, I've said this before on the show. In other election cycles, I have voted Republican or Democrat based on the candidate. Now, I myself am unwilling to vote for the lesser of two evils. So this election cycle, and I don't know what I know your politics, but I don't know what you did. I'm looking at a plate with a shit sandwich on it, or another plate with a shit sandwich with cheese. I'm not going to eat those sandwiches.
But you like cheese.
I have to vote my conscience, and I voted for somebody that I didn't consider the lesser of two evils. I voted for the candidate that I agreed with the most. And that's I will admit, I voted for Jorgensen. I tried to even get her on the show, and I was talking to her press people, and they were very positive, but it just never happened.
Interestingly, back when Gore was running against George Bush Jr., it was Ralph Nader being in the race that probably caused Gore to lose in Florida. So because Nader pulled votes away from the Democrat.
Green Party. He's respected. I mean, Ralph Nader's, at the time at least. I voted for guys like Paul Tsongas back in the day. I remember
him.
I voted for Democrats. I've voted for Republicans. I'm going to vote for the person that I agree with, whether they have personality or not, because Tsongas didn't really have any personality. He was kind of like a turtle, but he was smart.
Did you get the little was it IBM guy? I can't remember his name.
I never voted for the Reform Party candidate. He's from Texas, and I've already forgotten his name. But he talked like this, and I'm gonna.
That's the guy.
They're gonna. I got death threats, and I had to back out at the last minute. And blah, blah. I can't remember his name for the life of me, real quick. But yeah, I'm not willing. I'm gonna cast my vote, win or lose. I mean, a lot of people said, well, I'm going to vote for Biden because he's going to win. Okay, so you're just voting because you think he's going to win, and you'd want to vote for the guy that won. But do you agree with him? Yeah. What policies does he support that you agree with? That's the important thing. And people tend to vote, well, I'm a Republican, so I have to vote for Republicans, or I'm a Democrat and I have to vote. No, vote for the candidate. Vote for the policy. Educate yourself about the person that you're giving the power to, because that's ultimately what you're doing as a voter, is you're giving that candidate your power.
So let's assume all signs are that Biden will be taking the oath of office.
He's the president. I mean, he is the president-elect. I don't like him, but he is the president-elect.
So I would assume that he's not going to say a word about vaping. And that is, we all need to understand that this issue of safer nicotine harm reduction is a tiny niche area in the grand scheme of things to everybody else's thinking.
Yeah, Ross Perot, by the way. Mark's listing him up with
there we go. I was also trying to come up with that name, but you're right. And we need that next rally on the on the mall, right? We need that needs to keep happening.
Oh yeah, definitely.
And
you were at the first one, weren't you?
I was.
We're right by each other. I'm sure we did.
Well, we should have talked, but more. But and we need to think about appropriate, peaceful demonstrations in other contexts.
Yeah,
Right?
I mean, obviously,
you can't go demonstrate on the campus of the NIH anymore because it's a friggin' fortress ever since September 11th.
Yeah.
And the same is true of the FDA. So we can't do what ACT UP did back in the 90s. But so what's the counterpart for today? We need to start thinking about this because it's not just winning with the evidence, it's winning with the voices of people who believe, as I believe, that our lives have been saved by a technology that other people are trying to restrict and ban and tax.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, most policy does not originate in the White House. It doesn't.
No, but they're going to make policy decisions based on what experts are telling them.
Right.
And
So
then
maybe the next one should be at Congress. I mean, you can literally get permitted to demonstrate there. And maybe the tone should be talk to me instead of,
nothing about us without us.
Let's start a dialogue. We want to talk.
Change
Come talk
the
to me.
conversation.
We have to, obviously the I vape, I vote thing. I mean, I've the message itself might have power if the politicians actually believed in it. And I've talked to politicians. I used to be a legislative director of an organization. They don't believe because we have no historical precedent other than in some, very small like elections in Arizona where we could point to that and say, you know what? We went there, we did door knocking for candidates and that candidate won. Yes, we actually need to show that we have power. But the problem is, and you spoke on this earlier, is the diversity of our demographic of vapors. We have straight redneck vapors. We have gay, effeminate vapors. We have black vapors. We have yellow vapors. We have green vapor. Like every persuasion of person, because smokers are every persuasion of person.
I think that's pretty heartening, actually. I like that.
So when it comes to politics, most people might claim to be single issue voters, but it just depends on the gravity of that single issue. So obviously, and I was on another vape show a while back, and I said, you know what? Obviously, you're a gun rights guy, right? Now, what if there's a candidate out there that says, I'm going to support your right to own and bear arms, but I'm not going to vote for vaping? So which one of your issues is the most valuable to you? Or you have another candidate that says, you know what? I support your right to marry whoever you want to marry, but I'm not going to vote for vaping. I'm not going to support vaping. So which single issue is the most important to you? Because we're very diverse. And if we get a candidate that's pro-vaping but is pro-abortion, are the religious vapors going to vote for that person?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely correct. It's not the right way to think about it. It's just whatever your political beliefs and other beliefs, we all need to be reaching out to our representatives.
So we need to
state level and at the federal level.
We actually need to reorient our mission or at least our conversation, because this needs to be a harm reduction message, which we've not pushed. We've pushed this is a small business. This is a freedom. This is a freedom thing. And we really need to embrace. We need to get Ethan Nadelman to come and talk, and we need to get Ray Nyora to come and talk, and we need to get Abrams to come and talk. We need to get Dr. Farsalinos to come and talk. We need to get Colin and Dr. Glover, get all
and
the
Dr. Gardner
to come and be policy wonks. We need to get these people to get into the faces and discuss. Yes, this is a harm reduction product. We need to discuss that.
Now, there are some people who don't like that phrase harm reduction.
Why?
Because it contains the word harm.
But these are also the same people that are pro condoms, pro seatbelts, pro fire extinguishers, pro life preservers.
Let me ask a question then. Are they pro when it's phrased harm reduction because there's funding? Is that the key? There's funding for safe sex. There's funding for methadone clinics. There's funding for put whatever you want in there.
Almost all of those other harm reduction on the health side, those harm reduction interventions, if you want to call it that, were resisted initially for many of the same reasons that people are resisting tobacco harm reduction now. I just tend to say safer nicotine because it's, gives it a positive spin.
Well,
but
I've been using clean nicotine.
I like it.
Clean nicotine is good too. The thing is, for those who understand what harm reduction is and embrace it on the drug harm reduction side, and there are some politicians in that camp, and a lot of Democrats.
I just got an idea.
Then the harm reduction phrase works. It's good.
I just got an idea. Right now I don't watch Good Morning America because I'm at work, but I know that they have they constantly have a crowd out there holding signs and people standing outside of the window. If we could get a couple hundred New York vapors or people from the area stand outside of Good Morning America with signs,
it would raise some questions. It might make them ask, well, what's that all about?
That's a great idea.
It is. And we don't have to have a permit for that. We don't have to have.
Somebody would say they were all paid by Big Tobacco, but
it would at least start a conversation.
Might
hold up a sign saying, "Ask me how to kill Big Tobacco with vaping."
I love what was the vape shop sign that said, we almost had Big Tobacco on the run until the government stepped in.
Yeah. I mean, that literally, ask me
right
how to kill Big Tobacco with vaping.
Yep.
Bunch of signs just standing in front of the cameraman at Good Morning America.
Good idea.
It's creative ideas.
It is a good idea.
Like this that helped ACT UP change hearts and minds when it came to
what? Buy 480,000 roses and 480,000 toe tags and print the names of smokers that have died and just go to Congress and throw them on the steps of Congress.
There you go.
Now, I brought that idea up about a year and a half, 2 years ago when they were scheduling the first protest in DC was the toe tags and roses.
I suggested a coffin.
So roses are about $1 each.
Yeah.
So that's only $480,000.
Well, no, if everybody, obviously yes. We can't get 480,000 roses because that probably would buy up all the roses in the DC Metroplex on that day.
That would cause conversation.
But
Kickstarter campaign.
If we got 7,000 people to go and throw 7,000 roses with toe tags, it would still be striking.
The day. We could do the day count rather than the year count.
Yeah. Was it 3,200 people per day? I think I did the math once. I did graphics for this. I can't remember right off the top of my head. But yeah, little things like that could get attention.
Yes.
Especially that would be visually striking, is to have a photographer set up and have shots of people dropping roses on the steps of Congress.
I like it.
Any little things like that could be impactful, and it wouldn't cost that much, and we wouldn't have to have a permit.
That's true.
Because I mean, obviously, all that stuff costs money. You know, getting permits and, you know, all that stuff for DC
Sure.
and time. This could happen quickly. I mean, I know what a toe tag looks like. I could design. I could print up a toe tag, and just do it. And then when somebody asks, "Why are you doing this?" If you call the local media and say, "We're going to do this," come and ask us why.
I'll put my dad's name on one toe tag, my grandmother's on the other.
And you know, we have to be guerrilla marketers about this. We have to be, you know, like you said, like Act Up. The reason they're called Act Up is because they were not quiet.
Everybody should go and take a bit of a look at that history.
Yeah.
Yes.
And what were their tactics? And the tactics.
Shock and awe.
I mean, some of it was evidence, some of it was confrontational, some of it was enlisting great artists and
the human spirit and stories.
There we go.
Yeah, I remember. Believe me, I remember.
I mean, the quilt.
Yep.
Oh my gosh! Yeah.
Yeah. Yep. I mean, some of y'all may not
brilliant idea
to remember the quilt, but you know, the AIDS quilt was beautiful. I mean, the whole story of the AIDS quilt was beautiful. The documentary about the AIDS quilt was beautiful. You know, I took a class years ago. It was literature of the Vietnam War.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the books we read was called The Things They Carried.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
and then
that's so moving. I know.
And then another book was called Letters Home. And they actually did a film of a documentary about Letters Home. And those types of stories, I mean, those powerful, because the things they carried is just, I mean, I don't care how tough you are. I don't care how manly you are. You read that book, you're going to fucking cry. I mean,
cried.
It's a fucking powerful book. You know, those things, like your quit stories, those are powerful. If we got all of the people you're talking about getting the testimonials, if we could get everybody that vapes to submit 2 to 3 paragraphs at most, you don't have to tell your entire life story, but tell just the value that vaping has had in your life. Submit them to CASA. Raise a couple dollars to fucking print them out and just deliver them to the Speaker of the House or to the Speaker of the Senate or to, you know, some mouthpiece politician that would be willing to listen to us. I mean, you don't have to make these big, huge, grand gestures and go and approach the entire legislature. Find one person willing to sit down and talk to you and bring the 20, 30, 40,000 testimonials with you in not on a flash drive, in concrete, bam, here it is.
Stacks.
We could get an ally. And that's how we start, is to get we need one ally. Then that person is going to tell another person. And then eventually
in the UK, there is actually a parliamentary group that is pro-vaping.
Yeah.
That's inconceivable in the United States.
Yeah.
Because if any politician, think of it from their perspective, anyone who comes out publicly and says nicotine vaping is a good thing for public health will instantly be accused of luring teens into a lifetime of nicotine addiction, blah, blah, blah. So that's a hard road to hoe.
Nothing worth doing is going to happen instantly. I mean, we are not measuring success as victory. We're measuring success as getting one person to listen.
Yep.
One person that would not normally listen to listen. I mean, I'm not talking about getting Duncan Hunter to listen. That guy's in jail anyway. So I don't want to rehash that, but I embarrassed him too. We need, you know, and this doesn't, industry can play the game that industry's playing. We're 3 consumers here. I don't collect $1. He doesn't collect the consumers need to, because there's been some talk that consumers sort of get ignored. I'm not denying that. I'm not promoting that. I'm just saying, you know what? If you're one of those people that think that you're being ignored, come up with an idea. Bring it to another consumer. 2 of you, 3 of you, 4 of you. You could build something without having a giant organization behind you.
I don't know, Patrick. There's only 4.5 million of us.
That's not enough, man.
That is a lot.
No, if all 4.5 million. Now, you know, I saw somebody in the chat room. It's already scrolled by, but he said, you know, we've been doing this 10 years and we get 1%. Okay, so if there's 4.5 million, what's 1% of 4.5 million?
Well, there's 400 of us on Twitter, and then
so it doesn't take everybody, right? I mean, there's no way we're going to get everybody. And we know that CASA's mailing list is about 200,000 people or something like that. That's the number of engaged people that have participated in at least one call to action.
Mm-hmm.
You get added to the database once you've participated in one call to action. So yeah, literally the engagement with the users of these products is not 100%, because there are people that go to the convenience store and buy a product that you don't like and are fucking happy not smoking, and never once go on the internet and say, oh, well, if there are a bunch of people that use these products that are active and participating in legislation. No, there's people that have a life, that their only concern is not smoking, and they never research the legislative issues involved with that product. So the vast majority of people that use these products are not engaged.
I wasn't for over a year at first. I had no clue.
We're never going to get everybody. We don't need everybody.
Correct.
What we need are people who are passionate about the product. I'd rather have 100 passionate, educated, and informed people participating than have 100,000 people that don't really know shit. I mean, it looks good on paper,
correct,
but you can't control 100,000 people. So, yeah, let's look at new ways to engage with these politicians. You know, that's the whole purpose of this show, is just to get ideas, to
new ways to engage without being influenced by those who may not like it.
Right. You know, you can't go on to Parler,
do it yourself,
conversation, because the people that need to hear this are not on Parler.
And the people that don't like it, the more that they don't like it and they're your friend, do that a little more, because that's probably the way you need to go. Because there's a lot of lack of support from others. So I'll leave that at that.
Now, Charles, we have a tendency to go really long, and I don't know if you're still engaged enough to continue, but one of the things that we do at the end of the show is everybody gets a little bit of parting thought. Everybody gets to say something that they want to say that either they didn't get to say during the show, or they want to repeat something that's important to them during the show. So it is 8. What is it here? Well, it's 9 there. 9:13. And I don't want you getting in trouble for being on talking to us vapor guys for a long time. My wife is still at work, so I can go forever probably. But, you know, I am giving you an out. We could.
I would be, I'd be happy to sum up, but it's almost impossible to sum up, because this is such a complex field. It is I used to work with somebody who I admired a great deal, who in the field of global health. When I really started talking about the philosophy of what we were trying to do at that time, he literally saw it as a 3-dimensional landscape that was evolving rapidly over time. And this is almost like a 4-dimensional landscape. well, 4 dimensions if you add time. It is incredibly complex. I think there's no magic bullet in helping to tilt the needle in the direction that will save lives. We believe will save lives. We believe it based on a growing mountain of evidence. And for those of us who are actually paying attention to the research that's coming out of certain organizations, including universities, we're seeing a growing mountain of misinformation, peer-reviewed publications with incredibly poor methodologies that confuse causation and correlation, that will look at vapors and assume all their health problems are due to vaping, when in fact it's because most of them are ex-smokers, and so they have pre-existing conditions, and on and on and on. The poor rats blasted with dry hits from a vaporizer that no human would ever tolerate, and it goes on. We're not going to be able to stop that, and it will continue. And there'll be an asteroid hurtling toward the Earth a year from now, and they'll blame that on vaping too. And so whatever the next thing is after COVID-19, it'll be something else. And everything will get blamed on vaping. And there's no magic bullet for this. Everyone who cares needs to get active, needs to talk to their representatives, needs to remember that the misinformation coming out of the United States isn't just harming American vapors and American smokers, it's harming people all over the world as it gets copied and recopied, and it ends up in headlines on the other side of the earth. And we need to stop this. But there's no way to stop it other than to keep hammering at the truth, at the evidence, and to tell our stories, including our own testimonials. Lives are at stake. And it's sometimes mind-boggling. You look at the latest New York Times article, which was like a who's list of all of the anti-vaping myths you could ever imagine. And popcorn lung keeps popping up, and the stuff, it isn't going to go away, but the needle will tilt. And each person's voice helps to tilt it a little bit more.
Kevin?
Yes, sir. Charles, I appreciate you coming on way more than I can express. And you've seen me on the rough side on Twitter. I have immense respect for you. And there's a thousand reasons why everybody should follow Charles on Twitter. I'm going to give 2 examples, and they're not in any particular order. A while back, I asked you a question, and I'm going to read it because we can't share the screen. So in your tenure, professional life, have you ever seen anything like this, anything this insane in comparison? And your answer was no. I worked in global health for 25 years and have never seen anything like the level of junk science and deliberate misinformation that now spews out of tobacco control experts, quoted, and health officials. It's shaken your faith in public health. And the other one, and I want everybody to understand who we're following. This is somebody who actually thinks for himself. From the previous statement, he's been in public health 25 years. I put a meme, and I hate him and I love him, so I do my lines like Patrick hates me for. But this one was Exhibit B, I called it, and you said, it said, by placing the blame on nicotine, scientists drew attention away from potential public health focus on biological, social, psychological, and environmental factors that could help people quit smoking. And you, I quote, said, I always assumed the demonization of nicotine as the sole cause of smoking dependence was a tobacco control tactic, public simplification and or just stupid linear reductionist thinking. I had not considered that it might be a fabrication of the tobacco industry itself. And for that and many, many, many way more reasons. Now I can see you guys' faces. There's a lot to be said about somebody in your position and your past positions who can think out of the box and talk with us, not to us. And for that, I'm eternally grateful. Period. Logan's laughing. No, he's laughing.
No, he's laughing.
Kevin, I'm grateful for everything you do. So,
thank you.
So, I've been trying to get Charles on the show for a long time. I went back through my Twitter DMs from over a year ago, trying to get Charles on because I saw him
teasing me.
Yes, because I saw him on Twitter and I was just amazed at the, obviously anytime somebody with credentials is actually on our side, we need to give them a voice. We need to give them space to talk. And, I'm glad that we were able to do this. I mean, this is not the normal time we do the show, and we're going to have a show on Friday night. We got, Elenia, I'm going to say her name wrong.
Eliana
Rubashkin, for the next show, for Friday night show. The show after that, we have Aaron Biebert on again. It's been over a year since Aaron's been on the show. Well, it's been almost 2 years since Aaron's been on the show. We've got Aaron for the show after that. And then we have an advocate, Bard from Norway is going to be on the show 3 weeks from now. So we've got quality content that we want people to hear, because we had Samrat Chadawi on the show. We had Henage Mitchell on the show. We've had other quality guests on the show. And the one message the reason we're reaching outside of the American borders to bring these people on is just to illustrate how vapors quit stories and the vapor battle is international. The vapor quit stories from India, if you read them, they're identical to American quit stories. Our Aussie friends, their battles and their stories are just like ours. And this is not just a red, white, and blue fight, even though it seems that the red, white, and blue fight is being used all over the world. We need to show you, the viewers and the listeners, how valuable it is that we engage with, recruit, and help our international brothers and sisters about, fight their fights, because we might learn something that they're doing over there that is beneficial to us over here. And they may learn not to make the same mistakes that we've made here over there. So that's one of the reasons why we're actively pursuing bringing international voices into, our content, into our shows, because yes, we have international people that listen to the show, that watch the show, but the vast majority of people that absorb our content are Americans. And sometimes we forget that this is not just us. Sometimes we don't pay attention to a ban that's going to happen in the Netherlands or in Thailand or in Singapore or other places. I mean, Singapore's already fucked, but Thailand, that's one of the reasons we had Henage on, to talk about how you vape in a country where it's illegal. Literally illegal. So anyway, I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. We had technical difficulties. I'm going to download this video and we're going to fancy it up and put it on YouTube. I'll figure out a way to host it on Twitter, because we get a lot of plays on Twitter now. So I really want this content on Twitter. So, thanks for coming. I love all the comments. We always get a lot of comments in the chat room. We 500 or 600 comments per show. Keep it up. And yes, Clive Bates is on the radar. I can't set a date because I haven't really talked to him yet, but he's one of the people. I'd love to get Colin on, but I think Colin is taking a break. Alex Wodek would be great. I mean, obviously he's sharp as a tack, and he can put a zinger out there that you don't even know it's coming until it's landed. So we'd love to get him on. So anyway, thank you, Charles, for spending 2 hours of your time with us, or 2.5 hours of your time with us. Kevin, I love you. There's Logan. Everybody wave to Logan. And we'll see you in just a few days because we're going to come back Friday night. So be good. Bye.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.
We're exporting a whole lot of really bad and dangerous rhetoric, bad research, and unfortunately it's being picked up and amplified in other countries.
It's the same battle, Mr. Myers. We've been at it before. They want to addict these kids, this time to an e-cigarette, which has a chemical that's addictive. We know what it leads to. Sadly, it leads to tobacco addiction, disease, and death.
I'm going to get you addicted to nicotine. I have a customer for life. We have hundreds of cases nationwide where people have gotten sick or died using these devices.
Look what they're trying to do. All the delicious flavors of e-cigarettes are poison.
They're not people giving up smoking. They're not people that ever smoked before. Most people that vape never smoked before. Just think if your kid was doing this and winds up with an IQ 10 or 15 points lower than he or she would have had for the rest of her life.
Most people who vape are current or former smokers. For the addicted adult smoker who switches, there's going to likely be a reduction in risk.
There's a tremendous push to bring about prohibition, to actually prohibit vaping. Whereas the evidence strongly suggests that actually, up to now, the most successful way of people stopping smoking cigarettes is vaping.
When vaping increases, smoking decreases.
That's right.
When vaping is restricted, smoking increases.
We're worried that, in fact, a lot of members of the public still think that using an e-cigarette is as harmful as smoking a cigarette. I mean, I have said that it would be tragic if smokers didn't quit and carried on smoking because they hadn't tried an e-cigarette, because they were worried about the safety of an e-cigarette.
The most disheartening thing is still the anti-choice rhetoric, the desire to enforce this quit or die mentality and refuse to allow individuals to reduce their risk unless they're willing to give up everything.
I am the master of my fate. I am the captain of my soul.